Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephen Spatz, Assistant Outreach Librarian here at Villanova Falvey Memorial Library, and on behalf of Library Director Joe Lucia and the staff of Falvey Library, I'd like to welcome you to the final installment in this year's Scholarship at Villanova Lecture Series, featuring poetry readings by three poets, Dr. Joseph Lennon, Dr. Mary Madec, and Dr. Nathalie Anderson. I'd like to tell you that the Scholarship at Villanova series is a library-sponsored forum for Villanova faculty and award recipients to showcase their latest publications and research. And we have several events in this series every semester, including two special events, one per semester in fall. Every fall we have the Endowed Chair Lecture, and every spring we have the Outstanding Faculty Research Award Lecture. And so if you're interested in these events, please check our website as next term rolls around. For more information, library.villanova.edu. To get us started today, I'd like to introduce the former director of the Irish Studies program at Villanova University, Dr. James Murphy.
Hi, well, I was dragooned into this. Only about 5 minutes ago I found out I was doing the introducing. But that's because I bring with me an Irish literary trivia question. That's because I saw the flyer. I knew about this for a long, long time. Saw the flyer today. Was it April 13th?
You can't play.
You're ruled out. April 13th. Professor Quigley? Professor Lennon? I'll give you a hint. It's a feast day, a literary feast day. You be quiet.
She's already told me. We've heard it. I could cheat.
Okay. It's the Feast of the Holy Tundish. Does that help?
Oh, yeah. Read what I wrote last night, that Tundish one.
It's the Feast of the Holy Tundish. A brief explication. I can't resist that. It's also the birthday of the poet Seamus Heaney.
And Samuel Beckett.
And Samuel Beckett. And it's the Feast of the Holy Tundish because in Heaney's poem Station Island, one of the ghosts he confronts is that of James Joyce. And if you remember, you readers of Portrait, in chapter 5 of Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, Stephen has a discussion with the dean about the word tundish. And they have a bit of a disagreement. I won't go on to it too long. But at any rate, Stephen, in his diary, one of the last entries actually in Portrait, dated April 13th, because he looked up the word tundish and damned the Dean of Studies, he said. So he goes on to call it the Feast of the Holy Tundish. So because I had that trivia question in my head and mentioned it to Joseph, he said, well, you do the introducing. So I'm now doing the introducing. And you all know one more bit of useless information to take with you out into the world. But I'm really happy to do so, to do the introducing. These three people are all good friends of mine from various directions and for various reasons. One from Ireland, all of them really of Ireland. It's just a real great pleasure. I'll introduce there's three: Nathalie Anderson, Joseph Lennon, Mary Madec, doing things as good parochial school style, alphabetically. I'll introduce Nathalie first. Each poet will read for about 15 minutes or so, okay? So there are three poets. Nat's first book, Following Fred Astaire, won the 1998 Washington Prize from the WordWorks. Her second, Brawlers, received the 2005 McGovern Prize from Ashland Poetry Press. And her third, Quiver, is forthcoming from Penstroke Press. And the fourth, Stain, is under consideration by publishers. Poems have appeared in many journals that have been commissioned for she's been In many journals, she has been commissioned for the Ulster Museum, for the Institute of Contemporary Art of the University of Pennsylvania, and for the Artist's Press book entitled Ars Botanica, published by Enid Mark of Elm Press. She's authored libretti for 3 operas, Black Swan, Suki in the Dark, and an operatic version, which I'd love to hear, of Arthur Conan Doyle's A Scandal in Bohemia, all in collaboration with the composer Thomas Whitman and the Philadelphia Orchestra. So there's a range of skills and talents. A 1993 Pew Fellow, she serves currently as poet in residence at the Rosenbach Museum and Library in Philadelphia, which houses
Ulysses.
the Ulysses manuscript. So all things come together. And she teaches and has taught for a long, long time at Swarthmore College, which is itself a little wonderful home for Irish writing, has been for a long time, where she's professor in the Department of English Lit and directs the program in creative writing. So please welcome Nathalie Anderson.
Jim, thanks so much. It's a great pleasure to be reading here at Villanova, home of the one significant Irish studies program in our region. And it's a particular pleasure to read with Mary and with Joseph, although I kept, as I was practicing this thing, Mary and Joseph. I'm not sure where this places me. I think as the donkey, maybe. Joseph in particular has been a good friend through many poets panels at the American Conference for Irish Studies over the years, and it's so satisfying now to have him so close at hand. I'll be reading from my new book, Quiver. You'll notice that this is not a book, but a facsimile thereof. It's so tantalizingly close to publication. It's almost in my hand, but it's not in my hand. So there are some flyers in the back where you could order a book if you wanted to. Sure. But at any rate, there are flyers in the back. This is a book that centers on a section of poems sparked by experiences in Ireland. Indeed, in an earlier incarnation, the book was actually called, after this section, Slow Airs. And to celebrate all the implications of that title, I'm going to read a few poems from the book, from that section in the book, written in response to Irish music. I say Irish music, and I know exactly the sort of pub session you'll be conjuring up. But this first poem acknowledges a kind of music that the Irish themselves, at least judging by CD sales, enjoy even more. Even when on a night like the one in this poem, the music is downright awful. So this is called Country Night, County Donegal. Meanwhile, in the pub at the Foreland Heights Hotel, a weathered man in a western shirt straps himself to a rhythm machine. Giddy up, giddy up, giddy uppity up. It's that dreadful. Pokey cowpoke, choking a lame colt. He spurs it, reins it, stops and starts a dozen times before he gets it not right exactly, but so it suits him. One man, swing band, tone deaf and mush-mouthed, the words and the tune lost in his lazy gallop. One song much the same as any other. Oh, Bob Wills, oh, Patsy Cline, time changes everything. Now you've seen it, how the Irish love their country and Western. The young bucks at the bar, backs turned but toes tapping. The older couples straining to hear above the clink of pints each other's bulk. Elders, women mostly, settled on the settees. Widows or spinsters out for the night, impeccably groomed, each with her pearls, her proper handbag, snowy hair crisped and lofted by spray. 8 at the next table, none of them minding what passes for the music any more than you. Oh, Bill Monroe, oh, Johnny Cash, time changes everything. 3 songs in, and you've had enough. You're up to go. So it's no surprise when they rise too, 6 of them, double knits, pleats, stack heels, and hose, proper ladies headed surely for the ladies' room. 6 ladies standing up together, 2 guarding their bags, who step firmly now into formal embraces, arm circling waist, hand pressed to shoulder, and purposeful, sensible, comfortable, practiced and pleased, canter away, riding the rollicking beat, smiling their Saturday smiles. Oh, Charlie Pride, oh, Katie Lang, time changes everything. I wanted to say that that refrain comes from a song by the same title, Time Changes Everything, that's sung by Tommy Duncan of Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. And the song starts off by lamenting lost love and a fickle woman, but about in the middle of it, it changes around so that the male singer kind of wins. He says, you can change the name of an old song, rearrange it, and make it swing. I thought nothing could stop me from loving you, but time changes everything. This next poem is called Fesh, and those of you who've been reading Nuala Nagonal know that this word means something like festival with a hint of the fertility ritual clinging to it. I wrote this poem after a night in a pub in Ennis, which a lot of you probably know is not that far from Shannon Airport, and so a lot of people know Ennis for that reason. It's a good place to stop while you're suffering from jet lag. But on this particular night, there was a lot of flirtation going on, which alas did not include me. Nevertheless, I've written myself into the poem as if it did. So, Fesh. How long since you last gazed into a face this beautiful? Since a face this beautiful opened its gaze for you. A full moon couldn't loom any larger, rising late and low in hazy autumn, couldn't fill any lake or pool more full than your eye is full, holy water rising in the holy well. You can't follow a third of what he's saying, his lips moving slow, then fast, then slow, tilting his face from seduction into friendliness and back again, the words flying fast, birds surprised from hedges, the lashes raising and lowering their heavy wings, the hair a dense cloud stroking and unraveling over the hill's brow, the shirt washed to a pale, soft heft. Behind him in the pub, 2 pipers, one's lean head shaved down to a shadow, self-absorbed, arrogantly serious. One curly-haired, wind-blown, gregarious, and gap-toothed. This one's different. Looks at you only, your searchlight. Is there danger? There's always danger. The pipers pack their sticks and bags, the guitarists click shut the doors of their cases, the fiddlers raise their bows precisely together, the lights go up without your seeing. So this is what they once called glamour. Leave him so much as a ribbon, your world can age without you. Water rising in the well. This is a somewhat longer poem, a little bit longer, and a little bit more narrative. It comes from a situation I observed at a traditional music session in a pub in Donegal town. And it celebrates that sort of session, though here with a bit of a twist. So it's called Sitting In. You can see they don't yet know each other, these 6 young men settling in without rigmarole for the night's session, whittering at the pipes, tattering the boron, plucking tight the twanging mandolin. You can see it clear from the pub's far side, the near nods, the subtle inclinations, the brief and tiny hesitations, standing in for greetings and for graciousness. They're not talking. They don't have to talk. The fiddler plays 3 notes, the piper faintly cocks his ear, the concertinist crisply lifts his chin. No need to name the tune. Within 2 bars, they're playing tight together, welcoming the stranger. The table fills with pints and empties. The air fills up with smoke that breathes itself away. They take what's offered, one sip, one drag, one crisp from the packet, one quick turn at a time. Not a wasted gesture yet among them. You see it clear as glass, what boys they are. What boys they are. When the girl comes in, raking and shaking back her slip-knot tendrils of black hair, fingering daintily her little tin whistle, asking so prettily to sit in, you can see the tiny sigh drawing them faintly forward, see them assent without a word or glance or grin. But oh, she has a sister. Dough-faced, lumpish. See the jolt flinging them faintly back as she settles the sister with the whistle, claims the concertinist's spare accordion from the floor, tightens the back straps, unpleats the bellows, commandeering and steering the roistering reel. Boys on their best behavior, thin-lipped with cordiality. How long a run till we can be shut of them? Only 8 bars till we cut them clear. The reel stops reeling, rocks back on its boot heels, reins itself in, but the girls go on, wittering and wailing, lolloping the tune. What's a boy to do? Set upon set, with each dwindle and blurt, they stiffen, fiddlers sawing, horon thumped, concertinist flapping his heedless hands. Clockwork toy boys, glass-eyed and jerky, wound up and overwhelmed by endless repetitions, relentless pace. Who can blame them as one by one they falter, set aside their instruments, drift away, played out. The sisters raise their brows. Don't talk, don't have to. This is my last poem. It's called Slow Airs, and so you can tell it was going to be the title poem of this entire book before someone else actually used this title, and that is the truth. So at any rate, I wrote this poem after hearing the band Solas, which I know a lot of you will have heard. They're Irish-American, but a local band, a Philadelphia band, play a song, an air called Lament for Frankie, which was composed by them to honor the flute player Frankie Kennedy, a founding member of Alton, who had recently died. And at the start of this air, the fiddler, Winifred Horan, plays an extended note, and it's the kind of note where you think that she's tuning up her fiddle, but no, it's actually the start of the song, and so that's where my poem starts. Slow airs. The bow burrs on the hoarse string, a husky whisper, whiskey-throated in the stillness. Tune up, warm up, try out, space out. That sweet moment's hesitation before the melody begins. Then the bow turns, and the note thickens, heartens, tarries, swells, extends, cautiously cranes its neck out, tinges, verges, bends. No false start. Here's the song itself, maybe even a song you love well, Carrickfergus or Sally Gardens, but played now so lingeringly you hear every unfolding pocket handkerchief of sound, every quivering hair's breadth stair-step of a trill, every unexpected sweep and sprawl. The bow burrs and the bow burrs and the air slows, smolders, smokes up, rosin hazy, burrs out at the flute's mouth, blues, billows, blurs. Easy as breathing tawny autumn, the banked leaves chafing, their little blue tongues loosening and flickering, the fevers raised by their trembling, skirling up blue, the sky softening, night coming early. The bow burrs on the hoarse string, the breath burrs at the flute's mouth, The air eases, rises, slows. Between the bracelet and the arm, between the finger and the ring, you're putting on that air. You're easing it in and through the weave of your skirt, the savanna of fine hairs on your thigh. Open your lips, that air's on your tongue. That air's on your tongue, that air's slow on your tongue, slow in your throat, sweet and slow in your opening lungs. Airs and graces, hold a thing that lingeringly it starts to turn. Chaff buttering into sunlight, the black berry of juniper slipping its skin, still waters deepening into wine. The bow burrs and the air slows, curtsies and meanders, tracing within the long-held breath the quaver at the heart of any whole note. Deep in your chest, the blue tongues are flickering, grace notes skirling up blue, husky whispers fluttering. An air that slow can only quicken. Play it again, even the dust will stir. Thank you.
Thank you, Nat. We were doing readings and lectures and things like that here in the library. There was a bit of a mutter in the background, you know, it's slightly distracting, but think of it as the Irish library equivalent of performing in a pub. There's a bit of a background sound that the two things kind of blend together. I introduced Joseph Lennon. I probably don't need to introduce Joseph. He's probably well known to lots of the students here and faculty. Joseph arrived here at Villanova as the Director of Irish Studies last September, and happily so for everybody. And he arrives a well-traveled man from his roots in, he born in Newport, Rhode Island, sailing place, so it's appropriate, I guess, for somebody to go off. But raised far inland from the seas in the Midwest, in Rochester, Illinois. He's lived parts of his life in Ireland, in Italy, and traveled a lot in India. He's arrived here with us, with his lovely wife, Marika, and son, Nicholas, who's hanging on every word as the reading progresses. Joseph's here to read poetry, but he's also has been for quite a while an important presence on the academic side of Irish studies, maybe most notably for his book, Irish Orientalism, which is a wonderful example of high-level scholarship that in the context of Irish studies also important because it broadened Irish studies, the perspective of Irish studies beyond what had been sometimes too insular, you know? Maybe that's what happens to an island. It should become insular. So kind of competing with geography here, but it was good to spread the focus of Irish studies, and that's helped Irish studies to go in lots of different directions. So his book, Irish Orientalism, if you don't know it, and you're interested in Irish studies, get it and read it as an example, as an insight into Irish literature, but also to broaden your sense of how a given culture can be related to a larger global perspective, because we do live in global cultures these days. And that book, published by Syracuse University Press, won the Donald Murphy Prize for a Distinguished First Book from the American Conference for Irish Studies. He spent many years living with undiagnosed celiac disease and its effects, and I think we'll be writing about that at some point, and alludes to it. He's also doing a lot of work on hunger striking. There's a lot of interesting things going on with Joseph's writing. His first book of poems, Fell Hunger, from which he'll be reading, has just been released by Salmon Press. So, Joe.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for that very generous introduction. And thanks to Nat and Mary for coming and reading in this. I'm really excited to be reading from this book. I It's been years. I've been writing poems for a really long time, but I've never had them in a book, so I'm thrilled. So I'm going to read some poems that relate to being Irish American and to an Irish American in Ireland. This first is called Melody Lane, and I play a lot with the sonnet in this book. And a friend of mine said you can't call them sonnets because sometimes they have 2 extra lines, or sometimes they don't rhyme perfectly. But this is a break on the sonnet called Melody Lane. Was where the cops parked, around the corner from us. The first turn after the speed zone dropped to village limits. I still go back to 341 West Main Street, half proud and half not, that our old address could be anywhere in the US of A. But Chicken Bristle Road could only be near the 4 Mile Square, near Possum Trot, down Dannenberger, off Ramsey Road, across the Sangamon River from Honeywell. Back there, kids shot straddling dirt bikes, skinned rabbits, spat with authority. We grew zucchini to sell by the roadside, the old Conestoga Trail, mowed lawns, read books, played ball, hopped freight trains. On Route 4 to Staunton, Illinois, Jesus said, "Be ready for his return." The preacher implored in Midwestern earnest over the radio, "Turn to the heart of Jesus, enter the burning furnace of love. The kingdom is close, one day he'll drop from heaven above." But we were Catholic. My dad turned the dial. Even then I knew no one visited places like this. We grew up Catholic in a very Protestant, Methodist, Lutheran small town in central Illinois, and we're very aware that we were the idol worshipers. Here's a poem called 1981 about when the hunger strikes in Northern Ireland. This is sort of how they trickled to our community. The Kona brothers spray painted the letters 10 feet high outside the gymnasium walls. IRA. Black letters under a spring sky for strikers starving a world away. "This'll solve nothing," my father said, as Sands and the 9 flickered on the news. In the morning, Dean Hochstetter manhandled my brother, then me, into his office, thinking us Irish East Coasters were vandals. I swallowed spit, listened to his heartland politics, and just barely hid my anger. So, sure, I fell for hunger. A lot of this book is about being sick, and I know men don't really write about being sick. We write about being wounded. But here's a poem that's maybe about both. It's called Wood Bullet, and it's to my father and his father. Splitting old wood, I found a bullet sunk 36 rings in a log, a foreign object grown over like an undigested comment. Decades ago, it seared through thin bark into a live oak growing. New wood filled its grooves, and the sapling recovered by absorbing, embodying it. Burns smear the flattened nose where it burst into the tree, cauterizing the wounded cut. A half-buried beetle in a log, I thumbed it out as a secret, as a son reads letters of his dead father. From that smooth furrow, it dropped into my palm, its lead heavier than stone. I'm going to read some poems about Ireland and going back to Ireland. This first is called Family Country. I grew up in Illinois, but we spent all our summers back in Rhode Island sailing and doing other things. But eventually working in the mansions and the kitchens where my great-grandparents came over from Ireland to work, and where my grandparents worked, and where my parents had worked when they were young. Family Country. Whose mother never said goodbye? That was all left deep in the ocean, in the sea air as they slumped beside the railings. Goodbye, good riddance, they said to the land, leaving bald hills for pocket green. No baggage carried, No new metaphors needed, no frills. Loss is the seed of hunger. Those rugged hills once meant for me fullness, as we ate in a rain shower atop family country. How could they have left this mountain, this sky over a granite legend, high above Adrigal, what never wavers, this hungry hill? Hitching Tomb Road. These are all sonnets. So. This is for Seamus Heaney, who actually I met that summer when I went to the Yates School in 1995, when I met my wife as well. And I had a little poetry workshop with him, and he was very, I don't know, accommodating and friendly and all the things that you'd expect Seamus Heaney to be. So I sent this poem to him, and he said he was honored to be the dedicatee, which sort of kept me going. At any rate, I found a rhythm of walking today on a rare Illinois road in Ireland, hefting my pack between lifts on a 30-mile stretch till Toome. Beneath a crow teetering on a line, I stopped and on my thumb balanced the wavering road, splitting the oncoming from the past. The sun came to Mayo today, dancing on car roofs, flecking the blue. I turned my year tracing those gleams into constellations, known and new. I marked the year as the land, one sun hitching, open expanse. So I spent the day hitchhiking. It was my birthday, trying to get from Galway up to Sligo. And you may know that long, straight, nobody wants to slow down. They finally hit the open road in Ireland, and they're not going to stop to pick anybody up. Okay, I'm just going to read a couple more here. This is called Walnuts, and it's in a series called 29th Birthday, which I spent in Ireland. So this is me thinking back to Illinois from Ireland. In Illinois, whenever my family built a bonfire, after we tossed the brush, limbs, leaves, logs, branches, briar bundles, mown grass, dead clippings, garden weeds, stiff ferrule, flattened pumpkins, apple orchard prunings, rotten boards, railroad ties, broken chairs, and wooden rubbish onto the heap, I'd gather in my newspaper delivery satchel a hoard of lemony walnut fruit and drop them one by one into the burning pile. I longed then to hear of mysteries, to learn of tribal wrongs that could sear me, to know how the whites set upon the Sangamon, how the river flowed before, to resurrect the Illini and hear stories of the fields that lashed out from piles of flaming light, to hear what walnuts roasted in dying embers could cure or curse, to know why this flatland was one way and not another. But we are from places we do not know. Borders. As I walked up Main Street to Cronin's to see about the Mini, I should have said the beginning of the poem is about a car breaking down, a Mini. I stopped by a stone wall near the park where once I kissed a German woman I barely knew before I met my wife. A man I'd played in a band with came up and gave me a thump. It had been years since we'd last sung Moondance on a wet night in Murdy's. But we caught up in a moment, and he asked what was off in the park. I told him I was, once, kissing Ancha on the shore under oak limbs, how the tide sneaked in over our shoes. He laughed and told me about being a boy in Dublin and kissing behind the walls, out of the streetlights, away from windows on summer nights. Walls and fences, we concluded, allow as much as they disallow. We began to recall, as if for scrutiny, those walls and fences we knew by touch. He recalled Dublin stone and London iron, and ended with Berlin cement crumbling down. I told him of the wooden slat fences I walked atop as a boy, and the barbed wire museum in DeKalb, Illinois, of razor wire coils that slinky around garden fences in Greenwich Village, and of the high granite walls that keep Newport's rich off the streets. I thought then to ask him if he's seen the new wire fences in these mountains and their wooden posts, stakes of pine driven into rocky soil, stakes that sprout down, draw water up, shoot sprigs into air and live again. He said, it is a wonder, and someday, maybe, forests will again blanket Ireland. We stood quiet, he seeing the new woods, me wondering at the fences in my memory, the borders that reveal the places I've known, the places I've lived, the boundaries I've walked, the ones I've crossed, the ones I've stopped at, the borders that kept me from knowing the place that I am. What stays in me is what keeps me out. Before we part, he asks, "Just where is it then you come from, Joe? Boston, is it?" I never know how to answer that. Sometimes I play the Yank, the farm boy, the Brooklyn tough, or the Irish come home again, never knowing a simple assent. But today, I know to smirk. I come from my mother. Today is my birthday. Thank you all for coming.
Joseph. Next time we'll have to have Joseph give us a few tunes. He has tunes in him, and we have to release them. It gives me great pleasure to introduce a really old friend, Mary O'Malley. She's always, for me, Mary O'Malley. We go way, way back to the first time she showed up at Villanova with a 2-year-old Andrew. Remember that, Mary? It's a long, long time ago. And we have lots of things in common, Mary and I. Mary, many of you know Mary from Galway, so you're associated from Galway, but Irish people, where are you from? You know, the question, where are you from? An Irish person will almost always answer that by saying where he or she was born. They might have been away from there for 80 years, you know, so where are you from? I'm from Brooklyn. I haven't been there in 50 years, but if somebody asked me where I'm from Brooklyn. And Mary is from Mayo. And she wasn't far from the Lewisburg, Mayo, which was the home of Michael Durkin, who was a longtime librarian at Swarthmore College and good friends to people in the audience here, good friend to people in the audience here, a wonderful friend to Irish studies, and well known to Mary and Claude. And my mom was from Mayo. So Galway is a theme for lots of people here, but we're Mayo. Up Mayo. So, Mary, many of you know Mary, she's now the Villanova's face, really, in Galway, NUIG Galway, where she directs the Villanova Center in Galway. And, but she's here today in a different capacity. She's here as a poet. And Mary, Joseph's been writing poetry for a long time, Nat for a long time. Mary's been writing poetry just for a little while, really, I guess. Unless you correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, but I know seriously since 2003, which is nothing. And if you know anything about writing poetry, it can be a difficult, lonely endeavor, oftentimes unrewarded or unnoticed. But Mary, in a brief time, has been both rewarded and noticed. In spring 2007, she was chosen for the Poetry Ireland Introduction Series. And in 2008, very exciting stuff, she won the prestigious Hennessy Award for Emerging Poets. Now that's big time in Ireland, aside from the fact that I think it comes with a bottle of Hennessy. Part of the reward.
Glass.
A glass.
Recession.
Depending on the glass, it might do the job, you know? So, and Mary's collection of poems, the first collection, is called In Other Words, and it was published by Salmon Press, the same press that published Joseph's book. And with her husband, Claude Madec, who's also a very good friend to people in the audience here, she started the community writing project Away with Words, which is now in its 4th year. So, Mary O'Malley.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that it's a great pleasure for me to be introduced by Jim Murphy. I never dreamt that I would stand here before an audience in Villanova and read from my own work and be introduced by Jim. So I'd like to say that. I'd also like to say that it's a great privilege for me to read with Nat and Joe. And you're certainly not the donkey in the creche, okay? I might turn out to be. Anyway, I suppose in this collection I didn't think of myself as writing poems about Irish culture. I mean, everything about it is Irish culture because I'm Irish. But it was kind of an interesting challenge for me to look at the book and take it from there, from that point. Now, the first poem I'm going to read two poems that kind of situate me as a person, and even though I'm not going to say any more about them, they're just, I am a twin, and I have and my twin is profoundly autistic. So I'm just going to read two poems about him at the beginning that just kind of, that might be something a lot of people don't know about me, but Jim always knew that. Twin. The first time I dreamt someone else was in my world, I turned, floating inside by a dark red light, surprised by another creating tides, against purple rib railings, arching to tunnel, the anticipatory light of early morning, beginning of life. The second poem I'm going to read is a poem about, I suppose, it has to do with kind of consciousness of language and a confusion in my early mind around the time when my brother was diagnosed as autistic. When they told me about my brother, I ran like the ugly duckling to a silent lake, seeking cover from the wild wet winds coming in on the shiver of the dawn. I tried to construct the new word, sounded out what I heard, artistic, over the drumlins of home, low-lying clouds pressing in on my throat. I wondered about what they said, about how my brother was artistic, was wounded already that no one would like my pictures anymore. I didn't know that R could colour a vowel. When it lost its colour, it fell like a dropped chin, a norlessness that made it difficult to be a twin, but taught me to listen for the double-cross words. Things will cheer up eventually. The next poem is not one of those cheering up poems, but it's, I suppose, a response to what Jim was saying about living on an island, and I suppose it's the experience, a little dark perhaps, but that opens out at the end of how I map myself into my childhood. Cartographer. You knew that country when you were young, as you leaned against the windowsill, your breasts pert against a slice of moon, sore in the chill. The populations of that country were in the curtains at nightfall, the wallpaper in the half-light, the 2-bar heater, alive with towns. You walked through it, holding back on banks of country lanes from dark silhouettes. And when it was winter and that country stood still, you felt surreal watching Star Trek, knowing it had no horizons. So you went outside the back door and the sky fell, pressed you into the vinyl floors, sweating from winter. That country you knew when you were young, you could never give directions to, its longitude and latitude, the breadth and depth of your memory. You might have said, come here, if you were able, but you stayed there, your feet stuck in mud, the suck of your wellies pressing you into the earth. The boundary, the bedroom door, closed at night, so you lost your bearings, and the exit you sought when you sleepwalked, always the wardrobe. So when you played house, you marked it out with open plan rooms, made it roofless with surround light. You grew up in that country, somehow all of your making, and one day you no longer belonged to it. It belonged to you, and you were glad it was far away. The next poem I'm going to read is the so-called Hennessy poem. And I suppose a lot of people from outside Ireland think of the big divide in Ireland as north-south. And this poem is kind of about the division, the east-west kind of axis against somebody. It's called, and I use kind of ideas, well anyway, I'm not going to explain it anymore, I'll just read it for you. In other words, I'd like to gloss your postmodern grin with a labiodental fricative to begin, then a bilabial plosive. God knows what would come out if I started to use my west of the Shannon round vowels which you are colonising. As you purse your lips to front yours, I notice that it goes well with your chic about town suit. You speak foreign D4 to the men in my parts, who respect sibilants that don't make a difference. Know that stop is surprise, not a rural marker separating them from the wise fellas up at the university. Or a noun, something that they would do to sort out a poser like you. You flex your intellectual biceps, obsessed not only by your manhood, but by the kind of man you are. The genre, an obtrusive voice. Your life, a metafiction, a revised identity. Now, your grandmother, a professional woman who walked to school from May to October in her bare feet, is unsure about her story. It is not one of the images you are staying with today. Your voice echoes in the 1970s box architecture of the new Irish University, hollow as Plato's cave. The sign of the times, no more than the minute silence for Guinness, for Irish before the singing of the national anthem. The men in my parts still check the sky for the weather, are ensconced in a world that loves them, will turn up at the funeral, pay respects to one of the best. You wish your words had meaning like theirs. It's what you left behind. Men pulling their wellies up over wool socks to go out on the land, while you lace up your expensive trainers to jog on an asphalt running track. You can hear the chortling of a bird coaxing you back to your senses. It would be too much like innocence to know whether it is a lark in the morning, a sparrow chattering, or a robin claiming territory. You put up the volume, adjust your earphones, check the zapper for the electric gate is in your pocket. Home is only a block away. I suppose I also grew up in an Ireland that was very complex from a religious point of view, and I'm going to read two poems, if I'm doing okay time-wise, am I? That kind of look at that, or react to it in some way, maybe in desperation. This one is written as a kind of a news piece. Pope has breast cancer. A source from the Vatican revealed last night that Her Holiness Pope Christina I has been diagnosed at the Gemelli Clinic with a tumour in the inner quadrant of her left breast. Her doctors assured the faithful that her chances are good. Words whispered were stage 1 and contained. They were also keen to mention that she is praying to her favourite saint, Agatha. It is snowing in Rome. The pigeons are falling down in St. Peter's Square. There is one question on the blue lips of her cardinals. Will she be able to make her Urbi et Orbi this year? The women of the world are looking for consoling words, breasts heavy with feeding, sagging from gravity, prosthesis and loco, all praying this night for the Holy Mother and Father Church. Okay, and the second poem is, I hope I'm okay time. This poem is about, I suppose, looks at the perspective of somebody who gave her life to this church and how that kind of looks now, I suppose. So, and it is based on somebody I know. I am the woman who took the veil, who in the year of our Lord, 1942, at the age of 16, my mother weeping at the door, my father unable to say goodbye, entered the Presentation Convent in Galway, who made the best of hard times, a way to be educated through vows, left the rudeness of country life for parlours, haggards for manicured gardens, who wept, though, for my mother's flowers at the south gable, who tried to bring all at home up in the world one rung at a time, cajoling, advising, keeping in touch, who could not know touch, only the feel of a wimple, gabardine, cotton, winter wool, who was tortured by loneliness, sacrificed, could not go home to bury a mother or friend, had to wait for reports of how it all happened, imagine the scene, who worked by day at school, who didn't like punishment, believed in Mull Anoiga, my mother's mantra in my ears, who did the Legion of Mary visitation, emptied slops in Chantala for the infirm, like mother and father at home, whom I could not visit, the rules said no, who visited the home place after Vatican II, the old kitchen strange and new, echoing the absence of my father and mother, my brother and wife, trying to understand how a cage of manners held tears back, who had it hard, measured pain all the same as something good, suspected the soft life, knew how easy it was to substitute self-pity for love, who looks to the young to tell my story, though I am a woman of my time, tired now, ready to go, a lone survivor in my convent home, who will persevere to the end, believing that with the help of God and His Holy Mother, it will all make sense, who will leave no one weeping over my tidy grave in the garden by the canal, only a heron rising from the silence on a winter's day, a robin stopping to check the disturbed clay, long shadows in the glass house, my cuttings lined up on the south wall. And finally, I'd like to read a poem about my arrival here, because Jim thinks I don't remember it. So I'd like to read this poem for Jim. Journey to the New World. We take the van from JFK to Philadelphia. Conjure up King of Prussia. Struggle to see a place. Imagine some great monarch spreading out his cloak. When we arrive to the warm welcome of our host, we wonder if this is really the king under guise, who brings father, mother, and child to Banjo Town. We climb the stairs after the Wildcats score the winning basket. All these new names rolling in our heads, and only the ball of the winter moon familiar, bouncing through a window without curtains. We fall back on the soft pillows. Our ancestors who made their way to the new world before us, caught in a prayer, the angels on our bedposts. Thank you very much.
Wasn't that lovely? I don't feel like the King of Prussia, though. It's nice, though. You know?
You put your arms out, you look like
a sense of royalty about it, you know. The King of Prussia doesn't go quite with Banjo Town, though. Anyway, that's a long story. Anyway, we had a lovely range of voices, all hopefully tied together with something of Ireland and from Ireland or of Ireland. It's kind of place you know you can't go there and not be touched by it. If you're not Irish, you're touched by it. If you're Irish, you can't go away from it, you know, as James Joyce found out. So appropriate to finish, I guess, with Mary, who's the winner of the first annual Feast of the Holy Tundish Award, which brings with it later, perhaps, a shot of brandy. Or maybe a pint of Guinness, one of the other. So, thanks to you all, and thanks to Joseph and Nat for coming to us from Swarthmore, and Mary from Ireland. Thank you all.